Hi everybody, welcome back to Right to the Top. I'm Adam. In today's video, I want to talk to you about the Task 2 essay, either IELTS or TOEFL, IELTS Academic, IELTS General. And very specifically, I want to talk about examples, using examples in your essay to support your ideas, okay? So that's the topic today. We're going to look at how to present the examples, like how to introduce it into your writing. And I'm going to go through some do's and don'ts about using examples, and I'm going to show you some samples from actual tests written by students, okay? Some samples written by students. So we're going to start with a little bit of mechanics, okay? Very briefly, we'll look at it. But it's very, very important in your writing that you actually introduce the example. I've seen a lot of people, they just dive into an example, but the reader doesn't realize that you have shifted into an example, that you're giving an example of something you've said previously. So this is part of the cohesion and coherence score. You need that shift. You need that linking expression to shift the focus to an example to support the argument. So these are the expressions you can use, and I'm going to show you there's slight differences in some of them and slight grammatical changes you need to make. So for example and for instance, these are essentially the same. You can interchange them. To illustrate has a slightly different usage, and I'm going to show you how to do that as well. Now, all three of these can begin a sentence or can begin a clause. To illustrate, however, can't be used like, for example and for instance, at the end of a sentence to begin a list. Okay, so for example and for instance can come later and be followed by like a list, similar to such as or like or including. To illustrate can't do that. It has to come at the beginning of a clause. It doesn't have to be the first words. You can put something like a word, comma, to illustrate, comma, and then get into your clause, or you can use at the beginning, and I'll show you some of these as well. You can also say take whatever your example is as an example, and then explain it from there. A great example of this is your thing, and then go on to explain it from there. So these are the main ones you're going to use. There are other ways to get into an example that's a bit obvious, but these are the ones I want to focus on today just to make sure you make it clear to the reader what is going on. Okay? So a few examples. Today's children learn very early on how to engage technology. Like you'll notice that all these sentences are the same. Semicolon, starting a new sentence, for example, comma. They can use mobile devices. Now, very important to understand here, I have a semicolon, and then, for example, comma. I'm starting a new sentence after the semicolon. You can put a period, capital F, for example, comma, and then get into your sentence. Very important to realize here that I have they can use. I have a full independent clause following this structure. If you're beginning after a period or semicolon, make sure you have a full sentence. Then I can do it like this as well. For example, followed by a comma and no comma after, for example. In this case, I'm putting it mid-sentence and I'm basically following it up with a list. And it's very important to understand the functions in each of these examples, okay? So let's go back to the first one. Today's children learn very early on how to engage technology. So what am I giving you an example of here? Firstly, I'm giving you an example of the technology, mobile devices and other electronic gadgets. And then I'm giving you an example of early on. When is early on? At what age? So by age 5. So I'm giving you two examples of two things. Well, technology is the thing, and early on is a situation. Okay, so essentially things and situations I'm going to use, for instance, for example. Here, I took out by age 5. I'm giving you an example only of technology, mobile devices and other electronic gadgets. Again, because I'm just giving you a list, I'm not giving you a full clause, and I'm just giving you examples of the one thing, I'm treating, for example, exactly the same as such as, like, or including. You can put these, you can put these. The only difference is, for example, I would use a comma. For such as and like, I wouldn't use a comma. For including, I would use a comma again. So again, just a little bit of mechanics. Make sure you're comfortable with punctuation. By the way, if you want to see a video about semicolons, I made a video. There's a link up top here. You can learn more about semicolons. I also made a video about commas, or 2 videos about commas, and they're linked up here as well. Now, let's look at to illustrate. This is a little bit different from a for example. Today's children learn very early how to engage technology. To illustrate, many 5-year-olds, so I'm talking about the age, so that's a part of it, can search for and play new online games without their parents' assistance. I'm not telling you about technology. What I'm showing you is engage. I'm showing you how they engage, examples of how they engage. And that's the big difference between to illustrate and for example. For example of what? To illustrate how something is done. That's the general difference. In many cases, people mix these up. For most people, they won't really notice. They'll understand you're starting an example. But for a careful reader, it might be a little bit confusing. They will ask, what are you trying to illustrate? To illustrate means to show something, to show how something is done. So use illustrate to give an example of an action or a verb. Use for example, for instance, such, like, etc. to show examples of things and situations. Okay? So that's basically the mechanics of it. Now, what I want to look at are some do's and don'ts. Okay? These are very, very important because people make mistakes here a lot with the examples. Now, the first do is very obvious. Do use examples. Do provide examples to support your ideas. Now, before I go on, I want to quickly look at the band descriptor. So if you go to IELTS.org, this is for IELTS. TOEFL also applies as well. They do care about examples. You can check their descriptors as well. But for the IELTS, as an example, this is the official band descriptor you can see on their website. To get a band 8 in task response, remember you're getting scored on 4 criteria: task response, cohesion and coherence, vocab and grammar. Task response, to get a band 8, you need to present a well-developed response to the question. So you have to develop it. You have to give me a full, complete answer to support your thesis. With relevant means related to the topic. Extended and supported ideas. This is the most important part. Extended means you developed it completely. You've explained everything, so it's very clear for the reader to understand your argument. Why are you making this argument? Why do you think this argument supports the thesis or supports the whole idea of the essay? And supported ideas. Supported basically means examples. Did you show me how this argument works in the real world? Did you show me how it works, period, so that I can believe your argument, so that I can be convinced by your argument, okay? And also cohesion and coherence, also very important. I'll get to that in a second. Actually, I'll get to it right now. Make sure that the examples directly link to the point just made. Some people, they give me an argument, then they give me a sentence about something else that's a little bit unrelated, and then they give me the example for that argument that they gave before. The example must follow directly after the argument made. It must directly follow the thing, or the situation or the action that it is giving an example of. If you separate the argument and the example means nothing. It actually only works to confuse the reader, and you're losing cohesion and coherence score and task response because you didn't support your idea, okay? Put them together. Ideally, when you finish your example, go back to your argument or go back to your topic sentence or go back to your thesis to show how it all ties together. Make sure that your examples are correct. I've seen people use examples, like they try to present a fact as an example for an argument they made, except that the information that they give in the example is actually wrong. Now, when I'm not talking about like tiny little details that most people wouldn't know, actual very well-known statements of fact they try to present, but the information is actually wrong. Like they put the wrong country or they put the wrong company, or they put the wrong whatever example, and it actually weakens their argument because, well, it doesn't actually, that's not true, so maybe it doesn't work, or maybe it isn't this way, etc. Make sure they are complete. Don't just say one word and hope that the reader can elaborate in his or her own mind. Make sure that your example is complete so that I can understand the example, how the argument works. How the argument. And make them concrete. Don't be vague, don't be abstract, don't just say general things like language. Say French, say Arabic, say Chinese. Say something specific and concrete so that I can make the connection with the argument. I'm going to show you some examples of these things in a moment, and you'll get a better idea. Some don'ts. Don't overgeneralize. Don't think that your example applies everywhere to everyone all the time. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes doing this actually makes it weaker. It makes your example weaker, makes your argument weaker, makes your essay weaker. I'll give you an example of that as well. Do not make the example the argument. Keep your example short, 1, maximum 2 sentences. Once you start getting on and on about your example, you have no more time or words left for the argument, which means you didn't make an argument. You didn't give a complete argument. Try not to do that as well. And sometimes people just put in the word for instance, or they put in the word for example inside their argument somewhere, but they don't actually give an example. They just put the words for example with nothing following it or nothing connecting anything to anything. That will actually lose you more points than help you. So don't just toss it in. Don't just throw it in there and think that the reader can make the connection him or herself. Okay? Now, obviously, the best way to understand all of this stuff is to look at examples. So here's all of these examples, by the way, are from essays that I have assessed by test takers. I cleaned all the English, so we don't have to worry about the English. We're just focusing on the examples, on the content. So this essay is about what governments can do, or what governments can do to help the environment. So this person is making an argument that education is a very useful tool to use to help the environment, to raise public awareness of environmental safety. Great. Good argument, good point. Let's get into it. Firstly, proper training programs could be added to a school syllabi, or to school syllabi, sorry. As a result of this step, not only would new generation be educated, they would also be able to share their knowledge with others. First of all, nothing here about environment. So what exactly are you giving me an example of? Secondly, what kind of training programs? What are they going to do in these training programs? And how do these training programs result in anything? Well, what they will result in is a generation will be educated. Well, yeah, if they go to school, they will be educated. If you teach them math, they will be educated in math, and they can share their math skills with their friends and neighbors. The example here, or the argument, has nothing. You have to give me examples or figure out another way to relate it to environment. Secondly, the government can collaborate with companies and prepare special panels or informative meetings for adults in the workforce. Same exact idea, except now you're looking at adults instead of kids. What kind of collaborations? What kind of companies? What are they going to do? What kind of special panels? What kind of meetings? You didn't elaborate on anything. You didn't give me an example of anything. Point a little bit weak. Thirdly, the government can promote educational films on television or publish billboard ads or newspaper articles. Now here, this person came a little bit close. To share the proper methods to help preserve the environment. So, okay, so you can use the media to raise public awareness. But what kinds of things, what kinds of films are you going to put on? What kinds of articles are you going to use? What kinds of methods are these that are going to help the environment? So all three of these points don't actually say anything, and there's no examples here to support any of them, so I'm not really sure what your argument is. Thus, once they know that they should do something as well as how to do it, well, what are they going to know? How are they going to do it? Humans can act responsibly against the deterioration of nature. How? And what does responsibly mean in this case? Notice also, you have 3 points. All of them can be summed up in one. The government can educate the public. For example, and now you can bring examples. For example, Kids can be taken to nature reserves and learn how to interact with plants and animals. Adults can work with their companies so the government can collaborate with companies to develop R&D into green energy sources. And lastly, the media can publish documentaries about the environment or informative articles or animated movies for kids. Give me concrete examples. Make the whole idea complete about your argument. My suggestion always is have fewer arguments, more elaboration, which is why I also recommend 2 body paragraphs, not 3. Have a solid idea, a solid argument, expand on it, support it with examples, tie it back to your thesis. That's the easiest and best way to get a high score on task response. Okay? Here's another example. Co-ed school versus one-sex school, like a boys' school, girls' school. So this person is saying that there are those who believe that you should have 2 separated schools so that they can have role-oriented education wherein boys learn about the tasks they will have to do in the future, girls learn about theirs. Consequently, neither boys nor girls waste time learning non-useful skills, such as, so here's his example, here's this person's example, sewing for the former and tasks requiring muscle power for the latter. What's the problem here? First of all, as soon as you get into role-oriented education, you're already a little bit risky because a lot of modern young people don't believe in gender roles, right? Everybody can do anything. Girls can do anything boys can do. Boys can do anything girls can do. But saying that sewing is a non-useful skill, first of all, that's incorrect. Sewing is a very useful skill for boys and for girls. If you're a boy and you need something sewn and your mother, sister, daughter, wife, girlfriend, whatever is not around, what are you going to do? Walk with a hole in your shirt? No, you'll get a needle and some thread and fix it, right? Very useful skill, not only for clothes, for all kinds of different things. Lots of men sew. A tailor is a very good profession. A tailor is a person who sews suits for men, right? So you can make a lot of money by learning this skill as a man. And many women do lots of very heavy lifting and muscle work, and there are many women who are stronger than many men. It's just incorrect, one. It's very overgeneralized, and it's a little bit sexist. And if you get a feminist examiner reading this, she'll find a way, or he'll find a way, if there's a feminist man, he or she will find a way to lower your score because this is a very weak example for a very controversial argument. Okay. So here's the example. Somebody just threw in, for instance. Moreover, it is possible that the project should be financed by angel investors whereby incomings could escalate considerably. Okay, so this is I'm already inside the argument. Moreover, if the company were to become international, for instance, profits would automatically skyrocket. For instance of what? What are you giving me an instance of? If the company were to become international, okay, if it becomes international, you can make more money. There's no example here. This sentence has no relation to the last sentence. You're just giving me moreover. You're giving me another idea, another probability or suggestion or argument. You are not giving me any example anywhere here. It is possible that it should be financed by angel investors. This could be, the whole sentence could be an example of how you can succeed in business. But here, this, for instance, has no connection to anything else. If I take it out, furthermore, if the company were to operate globally, profits could skyrocket. Okay, one possibility, another possibility. Both of these possibilities can be examples for how a business can succeed. But there's no example within this sentence. This word actually works against you. I'm not going to read all this, don't worry. So this is an essay about whether students should assess teachers or evaluate teachers, or whether teachers should evaluate each other. So this person, to begin with, university students cannot fairly assess their teachers. Good topic sentence. Students can't do it. They pick their teachers for convenience and preference. and they prefer the teachers who make learning fun. Then, for example, and this example goes all the way down to the end of the paragraph. So most of the paragraph is an example. It's a story about what happened to this writer in university or in high school or whatever. This is way too much. Keep your example brief, 1 or 2 sentences, and don't make this the argument. This is your argument. Use this as an example, and then come back to finish your argument with this example. So this is what it should look like. Here's the same example. I've reduced it to 2 sentences, okay, and I've got all the same information, all the useless information. That was just adding to the word count. It wasn't actually adding to the argument development. And then this is clearly not good for those students who want it. So I'm taking this example, I'm showing how this was bad for the other students and how this affects teachers in the future when they understand that students will be giving them their evaluations and their jobs depend on it, ... Argument, example, tie it back to your argument and finish it off like that. Fully developed paragraph. Okay, and that's it. I could go on all day giving you examples, but these should be enough. Make sure you're using examples, make sure you're introducing them properly, and make sure they are very relevant, clear, complete, concrete, and useful to support your argument. And that's basically all there is to it, okay? If you have any questions about this, please post them in the YouTube comment section. If you like the video, give me a like. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and come back next time for vocab, grammar, writing tips, etc. See you then. Bye-bye.